Good evening, everybody. I'm Gus Denhard, the Executive Director of Early Music Seattle, and we are here tonight to discuss Ballo dell'Ingrate, Monteverdi's dramatic madrigal. And Early Music Seattle will be premiering a video that was produced in 2011, this coming Saturday at 7 o'clock Pacific time. And we wanted to talk about the show with you because there is a lot going on in it, and things that could be explored a little bit that might make it uh, more enjoyable for you. So I'm lucky to be here tonight with Linda Tsatsanis, singer, and Donald Byrd, choreographer, and the choreographer and director of this piece, and Stephen Stubbs, the music director for this piece. And these people have very long bios, and I won't bore you. Well, not that it would be boring, but I won't. I will not read the bios. I think instead, if I can get them into the chat, it looks like all panelists and attendees can read the chat, so that's terrific. So please, please take a look here, and you can see what's happening with these wonderful people. And so I thought I'd start off just checking in with everybody a little bit. Donald, what have you been up to these days, and what has Spectrum Dance been doing for the past couple of months?
I think we've been doing what many arts organizations have been doing, which is trying to negotiate the pandemic. How does it to not have it stop us from doing the things that we do? I mean, we have to do it differently, but finding ways to still continue the work that we do. The biggest fear that I had a year ago, like around the 16th it was, which was that Monday after everything kind of shut down on the 13th, was like, how do I keep making dance? And I just didn't know how it was going to happen. And so I was in a panic. And so what has happened is that Spectrum, we figured out a way to still do what we do. In the fall, we had a fall season. We created 2 films, and now we are preparing for our spring season, which is a race and climate change festival, which we will do in June. So I've just been kind of putting one foot in front of the other and going. That's what I've been doing.
Great. Steve, how about you? What's been happening?
We had very much the same situation that Donald just described, which was basically first saying, well, we're a concert giving organization, Pacific Music Works, and what do we do if we can't give concerts? So we did a few things. We luckily have a nice archive of the things we had done over the previous 10 years. And so we started putting those things out online to sort of bridge over the time that we weren't being able to be together. And then one of our board members had the brilliant idea to start making films to pre-existing audio that we had made. In other words, CDs that we had recorded could be turned into video events by working together with a videographer team, which we found in Portland, Oregon, and they were wonderful. And so we spent the summer making some films to our pre-existing audio. And then we went on, and as I think all arts organizations found, we couldn't plan in the way we could before, right? You couldn't plan a whole season. Nobody knew what was going to happen 3 months, 5 months down the road. So we began planning in smaller increments, and we planned, you could say, a fall season, and that we filmed those, videoed those concerts, and got to the end of the year and decided what we could do for the rest of the year. So we're now in the spring half season, and we're sort of like halfway through filming what we need to do for that. Part of what happened was sort of my personal story, which was that Maxine and I and our children moved to Southern California about a year and a half ago. And that meant that, getting to Seattle to do concerts was a new thing, which had to be negotiated with the mountain passes if you were going to drive with a car over the mountain passes with harps and lutes. So particularly now over the winter season, we've been making films in our own house. So we made one of Reggie Mobley and me doing lute songs here, and then recently one with Maxine and me doing a duo concert. So we've sort of turned our house into a studio, and that's been kind of exciting in a way.
Well, interesting. Yeah. Linda, what's been going on?
Yeah, well, I think like most musicians, I've tried to keep busy practicing, even though it's sometimes hard to practice for what feels like nothing in the future. But also trying to think about online content, just like all these organizations are doing. And Nathan and I are so thankful to Early Music Seattle for making If Music Be possible. It was a fun production to put together for your organization. So many thanks to you, Gus, for making that happen. I'm lucky that I have a church job. And at St. James Episcopal on the Upper East Side. We've been singing with masks since September. And it's been, each time it's such a joy, even though you're singing through a mask, it's such a joy to have that little bit of time to collaborate with other people. It's such a highlight of the week for me. And it does, each time I walk back home, I'm filled with hope that, things will get back to a place where we can collaborate in person together. And yeah, but other than that, we have a new dog. Sorry if she makes noises during this time, but other than that, just trying to keep busy and think about the future and future projects.
Yeah, we're all in this, that's for sure. Yeah. Well, I thought I'd start just to try to maybe set the stage a little bit for this production, and kind of think back to a time several years ago where Early Music Seattle and also Pacific Music Works, I think at the time it was Pacific Opera Works was the name of the organization. We were both coexisting in Seattle and creating early opera at more or less the same time. Early Music Seattle got a start in 2005 with a community production that crossed from professional to community, Blow's Venus and Adonis. And then I think our most successful production was Coronation of Popea, which Stephen directed. And our second most successful production was Ballo dell'Ingrate and L'Anfi Parnasso, which Stephen directed. And Donald was a stage director and choreographer for Ballo dell'Ingrate. So I'll let Steve check in on this for a moment. It was a very fertile time for Early Music Seattle to delve into this idea of stage productions. We'd always been a concert organization and a community organization with amateur musicians playing a large part. So there was a lot of good that came out of this time. There was a lot of community involvement and interest that could be generated because people in Seattle know what opera is. There is a major opera company here. Helped to raise the profile of our organizations and early music, and Baroque music in particular. We engaged some new donors and new audience members who followed us into the concert hall as well. But it was expensive. And in the end, the ability to compete with Seattle Opera for production values in particular was really probably impossible. Some great work was done and some great work was captured on film, and no regrets. It was just part of the evolution of the music scene in Seattle, and definitely worth the pain. But we're not doing opera right now, and it's not entirely clear when or if we would do it again. And Steve, can you fill in a little bit here, or what's the story from where you were coming from?
Well, where I was coming from, I mean, I came originally from Seattle, but I had spent 30 years in Europe. And during that time, I got to do a lot of Italian opera with Alan Curtis in Italy, and a lot of French opera with William Christie in France. And that was my education, you could say. And it was absolutely wonderful. I got to play in wonderful theaters like the La Piccolo Scala and the San Carlo in Naples, but even more than that, the Teatro Olimpico in Vicenza was just a remarkable thing, built in 1590. So I came back to Seattle after 30 years in Europe with that as my background, and I kind of just wished that it would be possible to go on making that sort of thing happen in Seattle. And as you say, it's not easy. I mean, opera is expensive, and opera usually has an infrastructure of having an opera house and staff and so on. And we were just making it up as we went along. Both Early Music Seattle and Pacific Music Works, we did our production, which was pretty much the same time, just after Popea, I think. Is that right? Yeah, just after Popea. We brought William Kentridge, the South African artist, and the Handspring Puppet Company from South Africa to put on a return of Ulysses, which was something that they had done, not with me, but they had done by themselves with another company in Europe. And I heard about it and saw it and thought it was wonderful and wanted to bring it to Seattle. So I did. It was 2008, so it was the time of the economic crash. And I basically lost my personal inheritance from that experience. And it was sobering. On the other hand, because of that experience, a lot of people thought, and also from what they saw with Popea and the Ballo delle Ingrate, they saw a possibility. And as you say, some donors and supporters came there and began supporting this kind of effort, feeling that such things should be possible in Seattle, but it's difficult.
Right. Yeah. Donald, I wanted to check with you, because also leading up to this production, you and I had an interaction with a project that I've been working on with the oud player Munir Bekin, and we had created a CD that was based roughly on the idea that a lute and an oud can play in harmony. So why can't we all play in harmony? Maybe it's a simple idea, but you put it into dance, and I think that is for me, that is how I got to know your work and was really motivated to involve you in opera productions. And any comments or reflections on any of that?
Sure. I think with that production, the thing that I was really interested in was how these the possibility that the oud and the lute, they shared a tradition, and they may in fact have shared a single tradition, as opposed to two different traditions that converged. And so that was really fascinating to me. And also the music that you chose, the pieces that you chose to play were some of them were music from Europe, the medieval European period, and so I don't remember if there was anything from Turkish traditional music, I mean, oud music that was there. There's one piece. But the thing that was really interesting about it for me was that it seemed to suggest that peoples from different backgrounds and different values could in fact coexist, and that often one of the things that one might look at about that is how the arts could facilitate that. In particular, music seemed to be able to cross all kinds of boundaries and borders and restrictions, and so I was really fascinated by that. So the piece that I did, actually, I did it a little bit like the dancers were dressed as soldiers, and they came into the space to perform. They came with their weapons, but before they went into the performance space, they had to put their weapons down and leave their weapons, and then they moved into the performance space, and the dance began from there. So I think one of the things that, and at the time I was very much interested in the like what role could the arts and dance could and might play in what's the word I'm looking for? Not improving, but creating some reconciliation in the world about people who were coming from that were in contentious situations. And so, the piece was fun to work on in that way, just in terms of thematically using that as a theme, but also the music, what it brought, it suggested in terms of the how it affected the movement in terms of that I keep thinking that the music was full of the ornamentation in the music they were like curlicues and arabesque, and so things were kind of doing this, and so that the movement that I worked with very much had that kind of intricacy of things curling and that way. So I mean, I guess it was in the old sense, it was Arabian. It had a kind of Arabian sense of it, even when they were dancing to European music. So it was fantastic to do, and I wanted to do more. I mean, I think always the problem and the challenges that you and Stephen both have alluded to is that it takes money, and people can be really enthusiastic about something, but they're not necessarily enthusiastic about releasing their money. You know, and
maybe they're listening tonight.
maybe they're listening tonight, and I think that was really the, you know, and I think at the time, Gus, I think you felt some frustration because that was something. It was a really good. It was a good experience. We had really good houses. The response was really good, and we could have looked at other ways to explore more, you know, things along those lines. So unfortunately it wasn't possible for it to go any further, or we didn't have the financial resources, the emotional resources, you know, to kind of do more.
Maybe we'll have a second wind in a few months. Yeah. Hey, Linda, what were you doing during this period? This would have been like 2005, 2008, 2011. You were in Seattle. You had come from Canada.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm from Toronto. I moved, well, I started my master's at Indiana University, IU, Jacobs School of Music, in 2003. And I moved to Seattle at the beginning of 2006 because I was allowed a year on my student visa to work within the industry I came to this country to study. And a few classmates had either already moved to Seattle or were going to. And it seemed like a really smart place to start a career because if I got kicked out of the country, I could just go up to Vancouver and you know, I'd be able to keep my contacts maybe that I had made in Seattle. It seemed like the right choice. The short story is I got married and we then spent like, I think we were there for almost 14 years. So yeah, in that time period, I was just kind of starting off my career as a singer. And Seattle was so kind to both my husband and I. I think within the first few months, I got hired to do Capriol's Caper. That was with Charles Coldwell and Anna Mansbridge. So with dancers again, and it was so much fun. I got that December, I got to sing with Seattle Baroque. And then a few months after that, we did Popea. I was Valetto in Popea. So yeah, those beginning years were like magical. Like I said, both Nathan and I were so welcomed within the early music community. It's why we stayed. We had, we met so many colleagues to collaborate and create projects with. I got to perform with so many wonderful groups, Tudor Choir and Capella Romana, Burr Ensemble, Pacific Music Works, all these, and Northwest Puppet Opera with Marguerite. That was, it was just wonderful, wonderful times, wonderful experiences, wonderful collaborations, and great, colleagues to do that with.
Well, we sort of set the stage for 10 years ago. It was tough for me. My memory is not what it used to be. So thank you for helping to relive some of that. It was a fertile time. And so like on to Ballo, I'm just going to sort of read my question. And I have to say, when we were creating the titles for this thing and I was kind of reliving the performance, when you're actually producing something, you're so worn out by the time the thing goes to the stage. I'm not sure that I saw it with both of my eyes open at the time. But it really made the hair on my neck stand up to be editing the super titles, going scene by scene. And so I want to know why. I want to know why it's so exciting and disturbing to watch this video. So my question was, one challenge of this piece centers around the really harsh storyline. If I understand it, women banished to hell are asked by Venus and Cupid to crawl from their pit to share their fate with the women in the audience. They were sent into the pit for being unresponsive to their lovers. Now they're being recalled to warn the next generation to submit to their men. Apparently, this generation is also not responsive enough. We're seeing institutionalized patriarchy at work. Given this is the story to tell, how did you go about your jobs? What was easy? What was difficult? Why don't we start? Why don't we start with Steve?
Well, I have to say that the way I approach my job in general of being a director of opera, I don't have the task nearly as much as the stage director does to say, do I approve of this story? Is this a story that I want to tell? It's the story that was being told by the librettist and the composer. So I see my job in the first instance not to judge, but to understand in what way Monteverdi's language is something intimately familiar to me. I've been working with Monteverdi's music for most of my career. And so I feel like I understand the way in which he is portraying the words and the way in which he is trying to elicit the sort of musical and gestural response to the words. So Monteverdi's already done that job, and I see my job together with the singers and instrumentalists in simply revealing and making as clear as possible the meaning of the words. Now, I have to say, in watching the show now, it's very interesting to me because I got the satisfaction of hearing the detail work we had put into the musical realization. And in fact, I feel that the portrayal of the words is really there vividly. But what I got to see in a way that I hadn't been able to see being a participant in it was the picture that Donald had made of the stage and the performances of the singers as being in the audience, right? I was watching them from the side and not seeing the full picture. And I found it just riveting and arresting to be part of. And I loved the atmosphere of it. And I loved seeing my colleagues in their 10 years younger guys, particularly Douglas, Douglas, the bass, who's the Plutone. He's gone on to great things, and I'm happy to say I've continued to work with him regularly. He lives in Berlin now. But to see him 10 years ago, sort of first spreading his wings as a really commanding bass performer, I thought it was just marvelous. Loved it.
So Donald, maybe the bulk of this falls on your shoulders.
I think the way you frame the question, I think is really challenging, Gus. I think one of the things that was really interesting about it for me, like where I began, was not so much the harshness of the story, because from that period and a little bit later, I mean, that's nothing new actually, in this sense of, as you said, like the women were not responsive enough, and so the men were, angry, and so you said that's true today. That's always, it's kind of an ongoing. And so I think another fantastic example of it is Taming of the Shrew. I mean, the Taming of the Shrew, the Shakespeare play, is a really harsh play in many ways, and so it has elements of that in it, in terms of the harshness and the that the women what happens to them, what the cruel actions towards them. I think one of the things that I was thinking, that I started out thinking about, well, what does it look like? Also, given where we were going to perform it, where do we look like? We couldn't make a really slick kind of environment, but I think that I was really interested in there's a movie, Frederick March movie from back in the day, in the 30s, I think it was, called Death Takes a Holiday. And so I was really interested in that atmosphere of it. Death is Frederick March, very suave and, and smooth and charming and curious in some ways. And so the other thing was, I had been told, what's his name that was the Plutone? Douglas, like they go, okay, what did they call him? About everybody said he's really good looking. That's the first thing that they know, that he had a great voice, or not, he's really good looking. And so in some ways, the visual storytelling for me was really was important, to actually use his physical beauty and charm and allure to make death this, to have death come across as being appealing and sexy, and then also that to have the people around him, also the beings around him, also be very be entranced with him. And so and in some ways, I mean, I think that's pretty much what I kind of focused on, trying to create an atmosphere that felt like, a Hollywood rendition of something in the 30s, with these people in some villa somewhere that were, kind of having these conversations and debating these things. I mean, in some ways, I thought of it a little bit like the operas of Strauss. Where not the kind of the more the conversational operas, where people kind of talk and they have big ideas, and that way I was thinking of it that way. So I think also that to me the at the center of it in some ways was the dance with the women, And because when they finally come out, to have them crawl out and basically are pleading for the women in the audience and everybody to understand, they demonstrated what was like, what their existence was like. And so that was pretty much what my focus was. And I think also, was, to me, Baroque opera has always, because of how I was introduced to it, has always had a kind of exotic strangeness about it. So I was introduced to Baroque opera in the early 70s, and there were, and mostly what I knew were the Raymond Lepard realizations and what they sounded like, and what they, and Janet Baker, and so with those voices, and so I think maybe in some ways what I was trying to do is to create a kind of rarefied world, but rarefied not in the sense that it created distance for an audience, but it was seductive and kind of pulled people in. I haven't thought about this in so long, so I'm trying to pull it out of somewhere.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, so Linda, for me, the whole work basically is an introduction to you singing. And maybe this is just my own impression of it. And there was just something about what you brought to the part, and a sort of a majesty to it, even though you were in despair. And so anyway, could you just talk about what it was like to sing the part? How did you prepare mentally?
Sure. Yeah. Being the closer to, having 5 minutes on stage after like 25 minutes of music has already gone by certainly was a challenge. I think what came easily, sadly, to me was noticing the striking similarities and the unfortunate similarities of our present day to Ballo, that we still see this social stratification of the few making the decisions for the masses. And we think, oh no, that's just something of old, that's antiquity, because it was the gods and goddesses, making these decisions. But really, we've only replaced that by inequality, financial inequality, gender inequality, racial inequality. So to me, sadly, the story was easy to relate to. Women being told to adjust how they act in front of men. That's not new to me. Yeah, so, sadly, that was easy, the easy part of it. I think challenging to my specific role was actually kind of making sure that my opinion didn't impact how I played the character. That I wanted to bring the humanity in her character. And like you mentioned, Pluto has just told the audience, the women in the audience, watch out, because this could be your fate. And then that's when I interrupt him. Now, what makes it easier is I do plead, I have the strength, the character has the strength to say, please, no, like, hear my case. So that's certainly a gratifying part of the piece. Unfortunately, though, she is just a pawn to the gods. They don't, I know as, playing her character. You know, she doesn't know as the character, obviously, but I know it as the actor. You know, that she won't get what she wants, and she's sent back to the underworld. So not letting that, you know, interfere with you know, how I played her. Also challenging to, I mean, I have to say it was such an honor to work with dancers and kind of have to appear as one of those dancers, and share a changing room with the dancers. That was so much fun. You know, having to fit into their aesthetic. I'm clearly not a dancer. I mean, I got rhythm, but I like cannot touch my toes. So, you know, having to squirm around and fit into like looking like I fit in with them was, you know, a different kind of challenge. Obviously not a musical challenge, but and for the small role it was actually quite a physical role, you know, as I'm singing my first words, I'm reaching out to Pluto in, you know, desperation. And his men pull me back at one point, and, you know, I've been crawling on the ground prior to that. You know, so it was like I said, for the few minutes I'm on stage, it ends up being a pretty physical role because I'm, you know, pleading for my life. I'm, you know, it makes sense to the role. And being able to collaborate with those dancers, I mean, that was just a highlight. I think anytime you collaborate with a discipline other than, you know, an artistic discipline other than your own, it makes you look at your own art in a different way, and it only makes things better. So that was a complete joy for me in this production.
I want to add something to what you just said about the physicality of it. The audience that you had to come out of a trap, so you had forgotten that part, right? So
oh my gosh, have I not forgotten that part?
Crawling out of the, you know, and then crawling down stage, so before you even open your mouth to sing. Yeah,
absolutely. If people want a kind of backstage kind of pass to this, the ladder that I had to climb, well, all the dancers had to climb to get out of the underworld, I swear to you, there was like no angle to this ladder. It was like straight up to get out of this trap door. And you're doing it in heels and a dress that you can't rip or get anything caught on. I mean, yeah, absolutely. Even before I'm on stage, my heart's pounding because, yeah, I'm climbing up this ladder that I have a picture of it as well. I should post it for you guys because I kid you not. Yeah. So even before you see me on stage, I've managed to climb a ladder in heels and not ruin my dress.
Yes. And the dancers at the end of I think you're on stage. No, you start to exit, but the lights fade before you could completely exit. But the dancers have to exit backwards down the trap back down to the bottom of the stage again.
I can't even imagine that. I think I was able, to exit.
Yeah.
Stage, right, left, whatever.
And as a reminder to the audience, this is at the Moore Theater, which doesn't have all the fancy bells and whistles of a modern theaters. Donald mentioned that. Yeah. Well, so we have some people in the audience tonight, and as I look at their names, I know that some of them know a lot about opera, and some of them know a lot about Monteverdi, and you know who I'm referring to. And so I'm hoping you're thinking of questions for us while we address the second question that I have, and that is so we're talking about 2011. This is 2021. And we've had the Me Too movement. We're in the middle of another reckoning over civil rights and equity. if you were asked to do Balo today, what would you take it on, for one thing? What would be different right now? I have to say that when I thought about um, the current times and looking at the show, you know, Doug Williams was Weinstein for me, you know, or he was a trafficker, and you know, all of that was flooding in for me, and I'm interpreting it not so much the artistic work and the language that Steve and Linda are so tuned into, but the impact of the of what's going on, and the story and the way the women are treated. So, can you comment on that? What would you do with it today? Why don't we start with Donald this time?
Wow. I don't know what I would do with it. I think what I can say is that obviously I'm really different than I was in 2011. I think I've had a lot more experience. I've done actually a lot more opera since then, and so I have a lot more confidence about what to do, what I would like to do, how to communicate what I'm doing, and so I think, but in terms of the storytelling of it, I think before, I'll say it this way, I think before, what I was doing, and Stephen mentioned something about this earlier about creating clarity. And so I was problem solving, you know, and the problem solving was how to make something clear, maybe not the best thing clear, but how to make something clear. And so I think now I could, in fact, look at it in the context of the social circumstances that surround our current time, and then how does this fit in there? Are there equivalencies or analogies that could be made? I think in some ways it could still stand that Pluto is still, he's like part of the 1% in some ways, you know, and it could really be focused around economic disparity, and again around, in terms of gender issues, around, you know, the role of women, and how, and to kind of underscore that even more in some ways. And then I think one of the difficulties and the challenges of doing something like this is if it's over commenting on it, and by over commenting on it, then you don't allow what it really is saying to come forth. I mean, I think that some way, by reinterpreting and putting things in what you're hoping to do is to actually bring some things out, not to drown out the things that are there. And so, I mean, the reason I'm saying that, because suddenly I thought, oh, when the women come out of the thing, out of hell, they can be protesters, you know, and so, but that's not necessarily true. And I think also one's options are can be limited if in terms of what you can say and do, if the singers are not racially or ethnically diverse, or whether you choose to underscore their race or ethnicity or ignore it. And so in this production, I think Venus was Asian, and so we weren't making a statement about about, sorry about the sirens. So I think it really is a matter about what things do you want to, I don't know, maybe I'm getting conservative in my old age. I would try to keep it as simple. I would try to maintain the simplicity of it, I think, if I were to do it again. And as Stephen was saying, I think the music is so beautiful, to let the music speak, and the simplicity of the storytelling do what it's going to do, not to impose things or on it.
Good idea. So I've been thinking about it too. You know, if you were to say we have this 400-year-old piece and it's about telling women that they should be nicer to men and cooperative with men, do you want to do that piece? I think most people would say, nah, I'll take a pass on that. But on the other hand, we have this artifact of Monteverdi, which is, you know, artistically imposing. And it has, despite the fact that it has this gendered story to tell, and probably something that was a sort of in joke at the court of Mantua, or you know, whatever, there is a sense of universality that's there in the artwork itself. And I say that thinking in particular about the music for the dance, this fantastic feeling of sort of coming unfrozen from death and coming back to life and then going back to death. I mean, it's just unbelievable the way he portrays that. And then what Linda has to sing at the end, it's just really the sublime bit of music. It's like you say, it's just the last 5 minutes, but it's the sublime bit of music. And particularly the all of the women together is saying, "Apprendete pietà," you know, this, learn to have pity. So to me, let's take the gender story out of it for a second and see people in the afterlife complaining that they're suffering for what they didn't do right in life. And then you have a messenger to tell them, you know, do the right thing in life and you won't have to suffer these pains. I'm thinking particularly, you know, there's a piece even earlier than this, the Rappresentazioni di Anima e Corpo, in which you see the suffering souls in hell. They happen to be men, and you see the angelic, you know, beings in heaven. They happen to be women. So the gendered story is upside down, but it's the same. It's the same basic idea, which is the suffering souls in hell are telling you, you don't want to go here because you were bad in life, so be good in life. To me, that especially that final message, to take pity, to take mercy, it's just sublimely beautiful. And I somehow take the gendered story out of it and see the human story.
Yeah, certainly the music is incredible. I mean, I have a little bias. I think my part's the juiciest, and you know, I troppo. I mean, it just gets more dissonant as I repeat that text. Yeah, it's gorgeous music, and no one can deny that. Monteverdi knew what he was doing. But I think it's a struggle that a lot of opera has, that it just kind of like drips with misogyny. You know, this isn't the only opera that has issues, yet we stage these operas all the time. They're some of the most successful operas, in fact. I think, I mean, certainly I'm not a writer or a director or producer, but I mean, I think it would be fun to commission a piece that follows it, like do the Monteverdi, and follow it with a newly written piece, you know, a kind of second act that, I don't know, maybe looks at the story through the eyes of the Ingrate. Or I don't know, maybe Venus has a change of heart and realizes that, you know, she finally finds the pity for these women, and you know, is on their side and changes things. And I don't know, maybe that's too much, but I mean, certainly the work is a beautiful work, and I think there is a place for it, you know, to be performed. But I don't know, maybe adding something new to it might, I don't know, show an audience like, but this is what it could be, or might somehow appeal to a 21st century audience. But there are a lot of new opera companies that are taking on the challenge that opera, that so many operas have. You know, they're being led by a new generation of musicians that have equity and representation and connection with a modern audience at the forefront of what's important to them. Actually, Debbie Wong, who was our Venus, has an opera company, Renaissance Opera, and heads things there. And I believe their motto is changing the world one opera at a time. You know, and they've done productions like they did a Dido and Aeneas, where they tackled cyberbullying and social, you know, cyberbullying. They did a production of Acis and Galatea, and cast the two title roles for women, and used the woods in that production as, you know, a safe space where they could, where they were free to express themselves through gender and their sexual orientation. And more recently, they've produced this really cool podcast. Please check it out where you find your podcasts, called The Apocrypha Chronicles. Really, really great stuff. And then they're also doing a production called Orpheus VR. So they're doing this virtual reality. I mean, it's still in the works, but you know, it's kind of a choose your own adventure opera. So, you know, there are companies who are looking at opera in a very different way, whether it's through casting, you know, choices. You know, they're just reaching out to diverse communities and a 21st century audience, and it makes me feel really positive about the future of opera, that there are these creators out there that want to change things and make it more inclusive.
I just want, I mean, it's a little concerning in some ways, what you just said, because it seems to suggest that something's wrong with those operas. And so that our job as a 21st century person is to fix them and remake them in our image. And I would suggest that, I mean, even though I get that, and I think that's really exciting, and you know, and I like that kind of stuff, but I think that maybe in some ways, I think that the first role or the first job is to have people appreciate them for what they are. You know, what is it really? And then certainly the things that I love about opera and dance and stuff, that they were just presented to me the way they were presented. And then I got to do my critique of them, whether like, oh, that's a misogyny, and that's this, and that's racist, and that's that. But I was also very much conscious of the fact that they were a reflection of the time that they were created. And so if we're doing them now, we can either make it clear that they're a reflection of the time that they were created, or sometimes what happens is that when we do these other things to them, we are commenting on them. And so it's a little bit like we're doing annotations. You have the opera, or we have the ballet, and then we have these notes on the side that are commenting on what they are. And I think that's a really different experience. And I just wonder if it undermines or devalues in some ways the original work. If there's too much,
Sure.
I'm not saying that it you know, some of it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think there's a place for both to exist. I think traditional opera just doesn't appeal. I think it appeals to a certain group of people, and the music is beautiful. There's a reason why it's existed for this long, certainly. I think, though, there are a number of people who are very much turned off by it, either because they don't see themselves represented in the cast, because the story isn't relatable to them. I mean, I certainly, I'm more of a concert performer than an opera performer, partially because of that. The stories don't really speak to me, and I understand I'm acting the role that I'm not that person on stage, obviously, but it's nice to be a part of, you know, something where you feel more of a connection to the art and to the message. But I think both can exist together. You know, there certainly are enough opera houses out there that you know, present, you know, the normal, well, not normal opera, but what am I trying to say? You know, the standard opera, and have full audiences, you know, do very well with that. But I think there is a new generation that is looking at things in a different way, and wanting to represent a more diverse community. But I think both can exist at the same time.
I agree with you, and I think
Let's have Steve for a minute.
Sorry, I wanted to comment on something that
Sorry.
Donald was saying. Saying that sort of taking the artworks on their own terms, in their own time. I came across a term, I don't know if any of you have come across it. It was on a political talk show that I was listening to. The term is presentism. And they were using it to talk about the differences between, you know, the 2008 election cycle and the 2004 election cycle, saying the 2008 people thought they were so much more intelligent than the 2004 people that they just negated everything that the 2004 people had said. But I think it's something very big in our world, presentism, meaning we think we now know the truth. We are so intelligent. We are so equitable. We now see the errors of our forefathers. And in some cases that's true, but also it's pretty arrogant, because I think some of our forefathers, people like Monteverdi and Shakespeare and Bach, might still have something to say if we take them on their own terms.
And I think you're right about that. And I mean, it just made me think we're woke beyond woke. And so I mean, I'm an advocate for stepping back from wokeness, even though a lot of the work that I do kind of wades in those waters. And certainly I've built whole seasons around that, but I'm also for really trying to historic works, trying to understand them in the context of when they were created. And then what I see my job being as, how can I communicate what that is to a modern audience? And so that there are all kinds of strategies that can be used to do that. Maybe it's done with casting, maybe it's done with concept. And so, but I think the first thing that I do is I don't make an assumption that what it is not communicating, and that people don't have an interest in it. Sometimes they don't have an interest in it because they don't know about it. They've never had the experience, and so you have to experience it.
Sure,
Yeah,
I agree
Linda
that
is
at the
talking about
core.
something though that,
Oh, sorry.
oh, go ahead,
Oh,
please.
I do agree that at the core of all of these stories, there is something to be told that still has meaning to a contemporary audience, even if it is hundreds of years old. And like you said, it's just, digging into it and finding the perspective and the interpretation that, that makes it represent and communicate to a contemporary audience. So yeah, I think both worlds can exist. both both forms of performance can exist at the same time.
And it's also exciting to know that people who are young are trying things that appeal to their sense, to their interest and their sense of purpose,
Absolutely.
which
Yeah.
will by definition be a little bit different from my perspective, for instance, at my age. And if there is such a thing as development of an artist over a whole career, this is part of that. This is part of that.
Yeah.
So I agree. Everything exists together, and this is the conversation. This conversation could go quite a long way. I really appreciate you all jumping into it at this level, and we're really looking forward to this performance. I don't see any questions from the audience. If somebody wants to shoot us something really quick, we'll stay on for another minute. But I hope everybody who is listening will just go to the earlymusicseattle.org website, and the player for that video will be embedded in there at 7 o'clock on Saturday night Pacific time. It'll start playing, and the hair on the back of your neck will probably go up because it's just that kind of a performance. That's just my experience, and so grateful for you all joining me tonight and reliving. Oh, we have a question. We have a question. I'm going to check this out and read it to you. Let's see here. Oh, okay. More of a technical question. I'm excited about the opportunity to catch the production on Saturday, except I can't attend live. Will it only be available during the initial broadcast? And the answer is no. It's going to be live for a while, and you can. If you don't see it on our website after a couple of days, go to our YouTube channel, Early Music Seattle YouTube, and you will find it there, along with a lot of other performances, along with a really exciting performance that Linda and her husband Nathan created for us called "If Music Be," which describe it in a paragraph, would you, Linda?
Oh my gosh, I don't know if I could. I mean, I guess it's a musical journey that we tried to put together. We had beautiful poetry by my longtime friend, Nikolina Trubetskoy. And we kind of go in between her beautiful poetry, and it leads us to a different, I don't know, we didn't really want to use the word affect, but I suppose every set kind of has a different affect to it. And she leads us, through to the next one with her beautiful poetry. It was a fun project to do, making, yes, our apartment a home studio, and recording in the streets of New York. It was, I think everyone has a wonderful ending, a hopeful ending, certainly. And it was, a fun project for my husband and I to put together. So thankful to Early Music Seattle for making it happen and making it possible. Please give it a try.
Everybody can check it out. Yeah.
Yeah.
and Ballo dell'Ingrate this Saturday, at 7 o'clock at earlymusicseattle.org. Thank you so much. Donald Byrd was here tonight with us, stage director and choreographer. Stephen Stubbs, music director for this performance, and Linda Tsatsanis, who had the leading role of the Ingrate. So thanks so much, everybody, and see you in cyberspace.
Thanks, Gus.
Thank you, Gus.
Thank
Bye-bye
you.
now.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, really good to see you all.